Give me a nod. Okay. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, we'll call this meeting to order. First order of business is to go through pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. None of minutes from November 12th. Was there any errors or omissions? None, mover and second of the minutes. So, Cerna, Whitner, all in favor? Carried. Delegations, move into the 2021-22 draft budget. Ruth,
Members of the committee, can you hear me?
No.
Is this better?
Yep.
Good evening, members. Today we have a revised draft of the 21 budget for your consideration. There were some items that were identified last time for further research or detailed information, and we also have new information regarding some other items. So we brought forward a budget which proposes a 2.86% levy increase. It is because we've been able to reduce it from the 3% that had been previously proposed. There are a few items that are listed in your report. Those are the key items, not all of them, but the bigger ones which have made the significant difference that we are able to pull down the levy a little bit. And so there are some revenue increases which help as well as some expense decreases. And they have also worked to offset some of the increases that we had not expected at that level. For example, insurances. We have it in our budget, of course, but it's much higher than we had expected. So we've been able to absorb that because of some of the revenue increases. The OMPF has come much higher. We had all along seen the province had been saying all along that they are going to start reducing the support provided to municipalities, and they had started down the path of providing support or funding for service delivery reviews so that municipalities become more self-reliant in finding revenue streams or other ways of being less reliant on the OMPF source of funding, and then that's how they will withdraw that stream. But given the circumstances of this year, the province has chosen to keep that OMPF funding at a level as last year, which has helped us. So we are able to have, we had expected a significant drop, but we are now at a better level by the government. So that was a big help for sure. Another item that's not in this particular chart, but what we have here information about is the budgets from the national authorities. So we have their numbers and we've been able to update that, and most of them have slight reductions from what we had originally in our budget. So we see a little bit of reduction on those lines as well. Most of the other items, we have done a review of the wages and benefits, given that we have quite the staff turnover, and we slightly adjusted our org structure as well. So, and then with the job evaluations that we did, so all those changes have been taken into account. Council remuneration review committee provided its findings, which were accepted, so those changes have also been included. And that also, all those various kind of adjustments are also in there. They're not specifically listed in the report itself. But when you look at your summary, on page 15, when you look at the adjusted budget, you can see certain lines are slightly higher or lower than the previously proposed budget, resulting mainly from staff wage adjustments, staff and council wage adjustments, ULPF funding, OPP invoicing, conservation authority budget adjustments, any new projects that we have, and those are listed on page 13 again of your report, where there are some one-time projects. Most of them are funded from development charges or from both these are from development charges. We also have the pay equity study partially funded from reserves. So that is one item that would impact the levy. And then the other items that council had, and committee had previously approved, partial capital projects were approved because they were considered urgent and could wait for the rest of the budget. And then the community group requests were also reviewed. We had some new information from one of the community groups. That letter is included in your agenda tonight. So I would like to draw your attention as the first, I guess, item to kind of have brought forward for discussion. If we go to page 21, where we have a listing of all the community groups that we have usually provided support for and the cemeteries. If you look at the last two columns that have the numbers, the 21 requests and the 21 approved, and the third box, I guess, which is the voluntary organizations, we have the East Elgin Housing Initiative. They had requested 3,000, and our total budget for support to community groups is about 26,000. And then for cemeteries, we have 24,000, so a total budget of 51,300. And we have committed, we had requests which added up to 55,600, so they were much higher than what we had in our budget. But what we have approved, if we were to approve, or if committee were to approve the 3,000 as well, we would have a total commitment of about 49,875 between the community groups and the cemetery. So most of the community groups and the cemetery requests were reviewed and approved by the committee last time. The only change we brought forward because of the letter that is also in the agenda is the housing initiative, the Elgin housing initiative. And can we have that?
Yes, I think we should talk about that. We asked the staff to look into that, and in fact, I did contact one of the organizers, and they are planning on having this event. They're planning on having this convenient place to have these homeless individuals come out of the cold. Initially, they planned on doing this all volunteer. They found out that volunteers just couldn't do it, and so they hired a person to staff this from 7 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's three. Certainly, there is a fellow over by the Catfish Creek with a tent that's right now in the tent. So I'd be in favor of doing this for one more year, but I think we need to see how much this is being used. If there's only one person and one staff member, perhaps going forward, we need to send them to St. Thomas in a taxi. But certainly I'd be in favor of funding this for one more year just to see how they make it. Well, I'll open up the floor to see what everyone else thinks. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I said I have no problem. I mean,
Sorry, the mic isn't actually on.
didn't
No,
Push the button, yeah.
it? Okay,
no, not going on.
it should be going now.
I can hear them. I can hear
The light is not on, sorry.
Okay, no, we have to look after those less fortunate. And, as you said, you want to see somebody sleeping in a tent or under greater, whatever, there's enough of that going on, so, I'll support it.
Any other comments? Mark?
them. Yeah. I can't have it.
Okay, speak.
Speak louder, I like it all. Okay, I support this 100%. I mean, we're pretty insulated from this kind of situation, I think, in our lives. But we can help somebody out. But I would like to see a report, how many people are violating the state. Is this going to be worthwhile going on? I would support the commission for sure. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? We need a resolution.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, for you, staff direction would be fine, and then the treasurer will make the adjustments as necessary.
Well, it appears that most heads are nodding to support the East Elgin Housing Initiative, so carry on with it.
So thank you very much for that. It's something I would definitely personally go that support. The next item I would like to bring forward for consideration is the capital budget. There were certain items that were approved at the last meeting because of their urgent nature, but I would like to bring forward, so that's page 19 in the agenda package. The items that were approved are lower down on that page, the here, there, undermining, and the parking area design, and then the EAs, that's on the next page. The EAs for the Hacienda Calor, those were the projects that were given the go ahead. But we have some others as well, and I'll answer some questions of staff. If there are, or that we can go forward with the proposed capital budget.
Thank you. Questions on the capital? We've kind of thoroughly discussed this at previous meeting, but we'll do one more kick at the can unless there's issues. No one seems to be having any issues, so carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, I would like to bring your attention to the couple of items that we had proposed as one-time projects in the operating budget. So we have, as has been previously discussed and come out of the service delivery review, we have a feasibility study for the water service expansion. So we have included that, and that is proposed to be funded from development charges. And then also an updating BTC study that has been approved actually at this time. And then the other one is the pay study. And so that is currently in the proposed budget, but I'm open to questions if there are any specific projects as such.
Thank you. Questions, and I think we need to clarify this. Obviously, we can't go ahead with the water extension unless we get government funding. And government funding will not come forward unless we are almost shovel ready, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, through you, that's typically the case because, as I've indicated in previous reports to this committee and to council, we don't have any grants available right now, so there's no program that's been identified. As a result, we don't necessarily know what parameters or what requirements those grant programs will require. So while I can speculate, and typically in these types of programs and these types of grant applications, they would require the project essentially to be pre-designed and essentially pretty much shovel ready. But I can't comment to say what a future grant proposal or specifications might be. But it would be my expectation that it would be similar to what those in the past, which is, as you indicated, would pretty much have to be pre-designed and ready then to be able to go to tender for construction. So we need to have some base information. And what this particular study is doing is not even going that far necessarily. What this particular study is going to look at doing is determining what the best solution might be, and I'll maybe even defer to the Director of Public Works, since he's much more versed in these types of things than I am. But we'd be looking at establishing essentially the business case or feasibility for this project, but it wouldn't necessarily be everything that needed to be done in order to be shovel ready. And I'll maybe defer to the other director.
Yes, I can confirm that as well, that typically for these funding arrangements, it would need to be a shovel-ready project. And as it relates to what the study entails, being a feasibility study, it kind of relates to this as being an idea at this point and take it to the next stage to see whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. And the feasibility study will determine that based on the economic trends and the projected construction costs, revenues, the whole project from the top down, but not really get into the weeds of actually designing that project. So
and if I may, Mr. Chair, just on that point, is, so this is what's being proposed, this level of feasibility study. And so this is intended to give both council, staff, and the public the necessary information to decide whether you want to go any further or not. If, as the director has indicated, if it comes back and it says, you know what, it's a great idea and here's how it can work, then that gives you information. If it comes back and says, well, it's not really that great an idea after all because of this complication, then you have that information and you know then that at that stage, you can make the decision not to proceed because you can make an informed decision at that point. So just because we proceed to develop this feasibility study doesn't mean that a water line's going in. What it's going to do is it's going to provide council, the public, and staff the necessary information to decide whether it is feasible to move to that next step and to start to get the project shelf ready if that's what the determination is at that point.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And certainly our conversation with both Jeff Eric and Karen Vecchio, I questioned whether there was money in their budgets for water extensions and wastewater. And they both indicated as of today, there's nothing. Going into 2021, there's potential. And so I indicated that we're making a consideration and we couldn't possibly go forward without their help. And so we both heard. So I think this opens the door and certainly is not a commitment, but we'll certainly, we want to be in a position where we can make the right decisions at the right time. Water extension would certainly give us the opportunity for 400 or 500 homes in the south of Springfield. Would enhance our base. It's an opportunity. I would also, before we even went, and this is a long way down the road, I would also like to have a commitment from the developer where they put some money in the pot as well. And that would certainly secure the fact that if you've got some developable land, it's just not sitting there for 25 years, because that's the worst thing we want to have. But I think this is a good start, and I'll open it up for discussion. Nice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have we got any options or any idea on where we're going to get this land if things move to the rest of that stage?
I think it's already in the works, but Michelle can answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it wouldn't be a situation that the township itself would be a developer. Council will recall that in the last couple of years, the township did purchase land for industrial development and went ahead and sold those parcels and facilitated that development. In this particular case, there are lands that are currently earmarked in the official plan for development opportunities in the southern part of Springfield. So they're in private ownership right now, and it wouldn't be staff's recommendation, certainly not at this point, that the township looked at purchasing those lands and becoming the developer. We would still be anticipating that for future residential development, that it would be, those lands would ultimately be purchased by a developer that is in that particular business of residential development, and then they would move forward. So they would look to acquire those lands from the private owner that owns them now, and then proceed with development in the future. So staff have not, in the context of this discussion, nor the consultants that looked at this opportunity, anticipated that it would be township-owned property that would develop. It would be something that we would be extending the water line to enable private developers to be able to proceed to develop those lands.
Any other questions or comments? I'm seeing heads nod, so, Mark, did you have a question?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. About the 500 home potential, is that correct?
The specific number hasn't been determined, that's part of the study as well, but at this stage, based on preliminary information that was prepared for previous official plan amendments, as well as our background study for the development charges, they're suggesting that it would be in the neighborhood of 400 to 600 homes. We've used the number of 500 as a base amount.
Right. What about sewage allocation? I know we were getting closer, 200-300. I think we were told at the time, if we push it over the edge, we're going to pay the majority of it, is that correct?
My understanding through you, Mr. Chair, is that the number of homes that we still have allocation for, and I might refer to the director, is about 300.
Yeah.
but it's in that ballpark before, that we have allocation for no questions asked. If we required more than that, which obviously if there was going to be an ultimate development of 500 or 600 homes, then we would have to negotiate at that point for future allocation. But even without, that future sewage allocation, there's still the ability within the allocation we have now for approximately 350 homes.
I guess it doesn't hurt to look at it, I mean, if you don't ask the question, we get the public involved when it goes, so that's the problem with that. But then before, we have our answers. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Lily?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just add a comment that we discussed at the county this morning, just the bigger picture, it's not just for now, like growing our home base just for our own purposes. There is a housing shortage and it's affecting our employer even to, attract employees. So there's a whole sort of economic picture and I think we need to do our part to ensure there is housing and we can attract people.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So I'm getting consensus that we move forward with this, $50,000 expenditure. What's next?
So the other one-off project was the equity study, and unless, committee has any questions, can we, go for that as group project?
I'm having trouble hearing you.
So the other one-off project in the 21 operating budget is the equity study, which is partially funded from reserves. And I just wondered if the committee had any questions regarding that, or we can continue to have it as part of the operating budget, move forward with that.
Well, we've discussed this before, and I think we're probably at the point where this has been done for 10 years, I believe. And we have found that some of our employees have left for better grounds. We don't know if we're competitive. One time, we were probably higher than the median, and we were stealing from some of our neighbors because we were paying higher. Now we, obviously, our neighbor to, in the center of us, their wage scale is better than ours, and we're losing some of our employees to our neighbors. So I think it's time that we took this $10,000 and had an outside party examine it. Not only our wage scale, but certainly the last time this was done, they examined everybody's position and where they were. Some were frozen because they were actually overpaid, I shouldn't say that, but they were. And some were bumped up. So I think it's time that we did this. And we want to have good employees. It's necessary. We don't want to be the township that trains somebody and then once they're trained, they go somewhere else. So I'm in favor of this, but I'll open it up for any comments? Lily?
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. I'm wondering about the timing, just because I think our structure is still stabilizing. There's going to be a little bit of turnover, new positions being created. And so I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that we need to do it now. I was also curious about, is that something that every municipality has to do on their own? And, so it's the same, a similar study being conducted in every single municipality. I was looking at the OMCS. I don't know where that fits in the picture, the Ontario Municipal Compensation Survey that we can purchase for 2020 result for something like $5,000 if you didn't participate in the survey. But 5,000 is still a lot cheaper than 30. And it sounds like it's something, I've done something similar in another sector, where we purchased something like that because we had staff who could then take that data and use it to do our own report. So I'm looking at options in terms of timing and either sharing or purchasing data.
Michelle?
Mr. Chair, through you, With respect to the timing, it would be my argument that this is exactly the time when you want to be looking at these positions, establishing appropriate compensation structure as you move into filling some additional vacancies in the not too distant future. Certainly the new positions that are being contemplated, we have the base information to allow the consultant to be able to establish where those should fall within a pay rate. Also, as you've indicated, there are going to be some recruiting that's going to happen in the not too distant future. And I think that having this information in advance is going to assist you in your recruitment endeavors. So timing, I think, is perfect, and that's actually the same information that the consultants who did the organizational review back a few months ago indicated, is that they believe that this was the appropriate time to move forward with this as well. With respect to the costing and could we do it a different way, my experience has been that typically when you're looking for a third-party consultant, the partnering with another municipality doesn't necessarily save you any money, because what they do is the evaluations are typically costed based on the number of positions that you have. And because not every, well, titles might be the same in some municipalities, their exact job descriptions sometimes fluctuate, depending on their specific organizational structure and how they split out their particular workload. So while I appreciate the deputy mayor's suggestions, I do believe, as well the consultants did previously, that this third-party review is the best option for the township at this point in time. And I don't believe that we will see significant savings by trying to partner with anybody else, because it's usually based on bodies, numbers of individuals, as opposed to just a blanket document.
Go ahead.
Just any comment on the available data that we could purchase instead of full service?
My understanding is that, again, that raw data uses some generic positions, and depending on the nature of and a lot to do with the size of the organization, positions and functions and responsibilities are slightly different, and therefore there would need to be a fairly significant amount of work to be able to try to amalgamate the data to make it applicable to ours. And again, it would be subject to staff's availability to do so, and I'm not as confident with that. Not that our staff aren't very qualified in a lot of ways, but it's a significant endeavor to be able to take that bulk data and try to personalize it for our own staff and our own positions.
Go ahead.
Can I clarify that in the package we have today, there was also 10,000 for next year, for 2022, is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that was a typo, so we apologize for that confusion. It's simply 10,000 for 2021 from the, to be funded from the tax levy.
And if I may add, the actual budget document, the draft calculations included only red one, it was just in the state part of it.
And I think, especially with the service delivery review, we're looking at shared services with some of our neighbors. I think now is the time, because that's going to be a different category than what the previous position was. So I think it's money well spent that we examine this and move forward. You want Max?
Well, I say I agree with you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So consensus to spend the 10,000? You see heads nodding? Okay. Go ahead.
So those were some of the key items that I wanted to bring forward for discussion. At the last committee meeting, there was some discussion about the CPI, so I have included some explanation / discussion about how the CPI is more of a consumer-related index, whereas municipal operations are more related to items ranging from gravel to soil and so on. So we can't necessarily apply the CPI as such to our operations for cost purposes. And then the the final piece is, of course, the assessment. So we do have the assessment data from that now. And because of COVID, the province decided not to start the new cycle of assessment. So we see that there is very minimal growth in our 21 CDA as compared to 20. It's mainly only because of any severances or any such supplementary changes that have occurred in the existing properties. So, and you can see that there is a fair shift to the farmland and managed forest class, which results in the proportion of levy that is chargeable on that, collectible from that tax class being smaller. Like there's a larger group of properties that now pay a smaller rate of tax levy as compared to the residential tax class. So that kind of goes back to the discussion we just had about finding expansion opportunities to generate revenues from our base and as well to address the conservation in the region. So that's that was what I wanted to highlight from the CPA. So based on all these changes, it shows now that we have about 2.86% of the levy increase, which means that a residence that was assessed at 300,000 and would have paid 1,974 in 2020 will now be required to pay 2,029 in 21. And residents in the farms also pay the back guide fee, so that will be on top of this number. But the change to the levy portion itself for the residents is about $55, and for the farm, it translates to about $21 increase over the budget year.
2.86, is it within the realm? I think so. Questions, Jesse?
Mayor Vanel, if I read correctly in the paper, St. Thomas is at 1.5 and London is being pushed towards 0. So somehow I think we still have a little way to go from 0.8, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So we still have a little way to go before we're there. And there are a lot of items in the chart that I look at them as just being placeholders. If they are placeholders, they should either be eliminated or made use of. And I can't think of a better place to make use of it than to have it go back to the ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chester. I just watched the London news tonight, and there are 3.4 as of tonight. And St. Thomas is 1.5, but there's also some creative bookkeeping where they're using COVID money to reduce their operating. That may be very short term in my opinion, because if you're using COVID money to buy your groceries the following year, but if you don't get that money, you're looking at a substantial increase. So I'm not so sure I want to have Nella in that position. Rick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My experience in, for my wife, was 9. Norfolk, they started out with 14% increase tax. 14% tax, and they got it down to 8, and it's still not enough money. They're cutting services like crazy. They want you to drive from Langton to Simcoe to the arena, and there's an arena right in Langton. They're just, it is crazy. And they're gonna have a bunch of years to try and play catch up. And I don't want to see Melbourne have to do the same thing. It'd be nice to have a 0% increase. Look what happened last time that London tried that. They spent how many years afterwards going after, making up for lost time. So I think the 2.8 or whatever is right for you guys.
Okay, any other comments? Nobody?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe picking up on what Councilor Finsky was saying, I know that for me, whatever we pass, whatever we adopt, as you know, we are, public facing, and I want to be able to defend and explain every single item. So I know that, you know, the past few weeks, we're not attending any community events and, you know, we're all stuck at home. So I reinvested all that time and I've looked at every single line. And there were surprises that I would have a hard time explaining. Particularly the way I was trained to build a budget, and I had a very tough CFO in my career who would say, if you want to come across as competent, you need to be brutally honest in your budget. And there was no tolerance for any line that would go underspent 2 years in a row. And would say, why are you putting that money there? And then you'd say, well, because I might have some other lines where I'm under budget. So, well, if you're nervous about one area, then just say, I am nervous about that area, and let's go to contingency, because there's some fluctuation in your materials or in your services. And do not put ever lines that go unspent year after year. So I know I've been trained that way, so I'm very biased that way, but I also think it's a very honest way of budgeting. And so I have found dozens that if I was asked by one of our constituents, why is that not there? I would not know how to answer. So, and not only that, some of these lines, so there's a line, for example, and I'm not picking on any department because I have found some in all departments. But, so let's say in road ops, there's a line on subscription for $2,500. 2 years ago, then it goes unspent. So the next year goes up by 2%. So this year is still unspent. And so now we have it again for next year, and it went up again by 2%. And I'm thinking, not only, we can see, so is there a need for a subscription, or is there not a need for a subscription? And why do we just automatically put it up, you know, by 2%? So I need some help explaining that before we approve.
Manager, who's gonna deal with this one? Go ahead.
So I was going to jump in when Councilor Lindsay brought this up, because it's a very good point about things appearing to be a placeholder in the budget. What I would like to elaborate is that every department and every director looks at their budget and makes plans for the year based on what information they have at the time, based on what expectations have been laid out by the council at the time, and puts those estimates in the budget. Certain items get spent at certain times or in certain years, and what you have before you is, I believe, 2 years worth of data, which is a reasonable trend, but not a full trend, I would say. And so, because they are showing as unspent or overspent or underspent in 1 year or in the current year, does not mean that they are not required. There are certain items that are seasonal or are at times, there may be things that change, and so that in 1 year it was not spent, and then next year we will have that opportunity. And particularly with subscriptions, I will tell you that there is always this confusion when charging that expense as about charging it into conference and seminars GL account or in the subscriptions and memberships account. So sometimes those confusions also occur, and overall within the entire budget, there are items that are, I believe, justified and which all directors have been reviewing and considering justified.
Nobody?
With all due respect, that doesn't help me explain it, because a subscription, even if there was an error on the conferences side is another line that is consistently underspent. And I understand this year is unusual because of COVID and a lot of conferences were canceled, but it's such a typical maneuver around budget. So it don't understand why, like, right now, we must know, do you need a subscription for next year or not? So I don't understand this approach of, we're just gonna put it there every year, because some years I will need it, and some years I will not need it. So I'm just picking on the explanation, because after we approve this, then all of us need to be able to give that explanation. So I'm sort of rehearsing here, thinking, can I explain this? And if I still can't explain it, then I can't approve it. So I'm not saying that 2 years, it's not about a trend necessarily, it's about, do you need it or not? Does your staff plan on going on conferences or not? Should you plan on, I mean, the utilities have been half, like I said, I have dozens of examples that I have a hard time explaining.
Michelle?
Mr. Chair, through you, I understand you're looking at 2 years worth of data, and we were in an entirely different situation in 2019 than we're in 2020, which you've already acknowledged, and I recognize that. For 2020, the staff early on in the year, in March, when everything happened, were given the direction that we don't know what's going to happen over the next number of months. If there are things that you can absolutely delay in doing, and we reported to council that was the action we were going to be taking. If there is anything at all, whether it was operational or capital, if there's any way we can save money, because we don't know what the implications are going to be as a result of COVID, we want you to do that. So there were a number of things that were dealt with. You mentioned one, a lot of conferences were already canceled, things like that, but miscellaneous items such as subscriptions, such as even some different types of office supplies, even, you know, where we could really hunker down and not have to spend any money. That was the direction we gave staff. And so they have embraced that challenge, and they have done that this year. And so you will see that there were a number of items that are even less expense this year than in previous years. And so while I understand that 2020 is an anomaly, and we can't necessarily use that as justification, and you're suggesting that it goes back further than that, and I'm not suggesting to you that it doesn't, but our expectation is that, and we've had this discussion with your new directors, with your new staff that have been brought on in the last few years, is that we need them to be reviewing these items. We need you to decide what your departments need, what supplies they need in order to continue operations, what is something that is, you know, something we can consider where your previous director thought it was a good idea or not, and let's make some adjustments. And they have been working on doing that, but again, because we have relatively short tenure for a number of your managers and your directors, that's taken some time to do. So I'm not going to suggest to any member of council that absolutely every line item in that budget is 100% perfect, because I'm here to tell you that it's not. But based on the operations that we have, based on the information that we have at this point in time, and the service levels and the expectations of council and public, we are confident that the amounts that we've put forward are relevant and are accurate to the best of our abilities at this point in time. Will things change over the year? I can tell you with all confidence, over the last 34 years that I've been involved in municipal administration, things will change. Our budget will never come out at the end of the year exactly the way we had anticipated, for many, many different reasons that have been communicated to councilors over the years. I mean, we have seasonal fluctuations, we have changes in staff, we have all kinds of new legislation that comes into effect, which affects everything we do. So I'm quite confident there is nothing in here that I would consider to be padded, if to use that term, because that's a term that has been used with budget deliberations in other jurisdictions or organizations. And at the end of the year, we are quite confident that this budget will deliver the services to your residents and ratepayers that they've come to expect, and in a fiscally responsible manner. But can we tell you for certain that every single line item is 100% bang on? We're working towards that. And with the staff that you have, they've committed to continue to modify and refine things, as we have been doing in this budget compared to the last 2 years as well. and we will continue to do so. That's the only commitment we can give. Whether you know whether they're out of the 5,000 line items, whether you can answer the detailed questions in every single line item to your ratepayer, I'm not sure that that's an accurate statement either. Or that, quite honestly, whether or not that's something that you should, as a member of council, be able to do if you have confidence in the staff that they are able to manage your operations appropriately and within the parameters that have been established.
And just to add to that, on as far as conferences, we are going to have, 5 heads of department heads that are less than 2 years, in our municipality. And even though councillors may not be going to conferences, the department heads may move well. So I think you need something.
That's, I will be the first one to say your professional development budget is too low. So that, I just picked up a random thing, and I also eliminated anything that was an anomaly just for 2020, I didn't even count. So I really just picked out where, and 2 years is not a lot, but I know the directors should have access to more than 2 years. So if it were me, like I said, the way I was trained with it, once I start noticing something like, my supplies budget, my utilities, I'm like double what, so 2 years in a row, I have not spent my budget. So that would trigger me to go back maybe to 2018, 2017, just to see. And then I would feel more confident. So to me, I know that it's a bit of it's a downside of a 4-year budget. I know we did it as a forecasting, but multi-year budget doesn't mean that you don't go back every year and adjust. And I didn't see a lot of adjustment in the model analysis, but as long if you can, we've already made a lot of progress, I think, in the last 2 years in terms of fine-tuning the budgeting, and I really, really appreciate that. So I think if we can continue in that direction, I think it's possible. I think it is possible to expect that. We have super competent managers, and it's a matter of seeing it as this is the expectation. We have a responsibility. It's not our money. We can't buy flexibility on the backs of our ratepayers.
If I may interrupt, the flexibility is necessary for the benefit of the taxpayer. It allows us to continue operations smoothly in a consistent and reliable.
If I may finish and clarify, what I mean by that is there are different ways you can buy flexibility. You can have, I absolutely agree, you need flexibility because you cannot predict the future, but there are different ways to put flexibility in the budget. And I think there are some ways that are more transparent than others. And so I'll leave it at that. We just need to continue in this direction and expect to be more and more accurate.
Thank you, Norman. Anything else that we need to discuss tonight? Oh, Chester.
Mayor Brunel, just looking at the line items, and I assume that the line item I'm looking at is 8245 South Dorchester Community Hall. The amount that is being spent there for upkeep is around $8,000 a year, if I read this correctly, and if I don't, then please correct me. However, if we're spending $8,000 a year there, why do I see, and I look at the picture, the same problem that was there 2 years ago is still there, and it's not been touched? Are we spending that money, or is it, as I used that statement before, or is it still just a placeholder for something else to be used somewhere else? I would imagine that whatever the problems were 2 or 3 years ago, they were brought up during budget meeting. Why weren't they looked after? And they're still not looked after.
Thank you, Justin. I think Councilor Whitner brought that up, and Matt had to reply, I believe, to everybody about the upkeep at the hall, but I'll let Matt respond.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I've only recently added those facilities and things to my portfolio here, but those are things that I put on as a priority to be looking into in management of those facilities and parks as well. We have those in those departments as well that I'm happy to start the leadership perspective on, as you say, on the South Dorchester Community Hall specifically. Councilor did point out a few things that were deficiencies that were there and that we are having looking into already. And I believe that we'll be able to get to a satisfactory condition there and going forward, the best maintenance that we can on those facilities in this possible manner.
I got Mark and then Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, this is Matt. Haven't been here very long, Matt, but I know this one thing, every time I walk in there, it complains about certain pieces, and I would suggest as a placeholder, we put in $5,000 for next year to replace one thing in the dishwasher, which hasn't worked in years properly, and I don't know how much money we wasted on fixing it, but I'm done with it, in my opinion, it's just not worth fixing, the freezer doesn't work. I mean, when you try to, not running the hall up, there's some people using it, and it's pretty embarrassing, so the stuff isn't working. So here's about 5 things on my list, I was saying, I think we gotta get it done, it's certainly, it's a bit of an embarrassment call. I would suggest we put in at least 5,000 for replacement. And if I could, I just have one more question for Rune. You brought up the increase for farms and homes, but what, you're basing the farm on how many acres, or what value, 500,000?
Yeah, so the farm assessment is $500,000.
Did you base it on $3 million quickly for me? Because that's, $500,000 doesn't buy a lot or anything, right?
I can send you information on all of the council properties, that's what the council is looking for.
Well, I guess if you kind of set the return, under increase. Yeah, that's more reliant, because we, things around here have got hot, they're selling for $20, one down to 25 acres, so that's big money. So caution no matter what. And the home value is based on 350, 300? You're going to mail out 300? In actual fact, probably no. They're gone Chile too, I mean, 500,000 doesn't buy a lot.
This is still based on 2016, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna see a jump in, well, it's supposed to come in 2020, right? But now it's postponed to 2022.
They are not yet committing how they're going to proceed, whether they're going to start the cycle from 21, if they're going to collapse it into 2 year versus 4, or if they are just.
But I think you're gonna see a substantial jump in housing. I think one of them said their average house was $540,000.
I know one just went up on 74, I think it's over asking. You can't believe it, right?
So I think you're gonna see a substantial shift next time.
And perhaps that's part of why they are choosing to hold off a little bit, because these values may not necessarily be true value. The increase has been so high that they want to make sure that the true increase is provided to the public.
So they'll phase this in over several years. Well, certainly, that's my guess, anyway. Rick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at the hall the other day when Mark was there, Councilor Whitman, and I thought we hired a guy who was supposed to go up and do odd jobs here. Do we still have him?
Yes, we do. In fact, those things that were pointed out were already identified by staff, and parts have been ordered and service calls made on those exact things.
I've never seen anything like that. The plumbing's taken apart. It just, it baffled me. It looks like somebody got halfway through fixing it, just screw it, and done, and left. And that, it is a shame. We built a nice hall out there, we built them all over the place, and you can't use it. It's quality of disrepair.
Matt indicated that this is en route to be fixed. Any other question, Scott?
Maybe on a good note, I think everyone talks how wonderful it is when we move out and prices have gone up, and that's because of the good service we provide. it's well known. I haven't heard any complaint from the south end of the township, again, that's why after we've done some approvals. But I just hope council, like, they wanna cut, I hear about cuts, cut this, cut that. The expectations are still there to have all the buildings perfect and have everything up maintained great, which is great. That all comes with price. And I hope council gets excited about revenues when things come forward, as they do about cutting, when things look at budgets, because you've got two ways of making a difference. It's either you up your income, cut your expenses. Nobody wants to cut because you're gonna cut a service. So hopefully, when the opportunity comes, for revenues to come about, I wanna see how excited council gets, because I see council is excited about cutting. So I'm hoping on a good note that those revenue opportunities come around and we can move forward with some revenues. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Anything else, Evan? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So regardless of if the comment was directed at me, I'm certainly not looking at cutting. I want very transparent, planful budgeting. And so it's not about cutting at all. So just in case, I felt I should clarify that. Because in fact, one of the things I would like to see for next year, because I still recall the report that we received from the consultants who completed the asset management plan had, when they assessed all of our assets, and the maintenance and the life cycle of all of the assets, had suggested that we should be looking at I think it was something like 3.7 increase in levy, which we're not doing. And I don't recall receiving a staff report afterwards to say, okay, this is what the consultant said, and if we're going to maintain our infrastructure, because I fully agree that is something that people appreciate in Malahide, we're not at the rate that the consultants had proposed. So what does that mean? Does that mean, what is our strategy? Because I agree, we don't have to, it's like the service delivery review, we don't have to do everything that the consultants say, but I feel like we need to respond to what is our strategy. And so I would like to see that throughout the year, perhaps next year, to see where are we at on the 10-year or 20-year view.
Any other questions or comments? Lou?
Yeah, actually, that was the one point last night I did want to touch on, is the asset management aspect, because we have a portion of our levy in our operating levy, we have a portion that is being transferred to reserve for life cycle replacement. And what I wanted to identify, so there were a couple of things I wanted to mention. Our fixed asset base is about $175 million, and the bulk of it, 85% of it, so about 150 million of that is roads, bridges, culverts. And then we have about 10% in the pier and parks, that kind of what's called land improvements. So these are our biggest items that make up 175 million. We roughly transfer from our operating dollars about 1.6 million into reserves every year. So that works out to very about 1%, little over 1% or not actually, of our asset base, the replacement value of our asset base. Whereas if you look at what the asset management plan and forecast and what their financing strategy proposed, they have actually recommended for the first 5 years about 5.7 million to be transferred or be used for life cycle replacement. And then the next 5 years, it went slightly below 5 years, but it's 5 million. For the first 10 years, essentially, it's in the $5 to $6 million range that was expected to be directed towards asset management. That was the recommended strategy, and which would translate into the 3.97% levy solely for life cycle replacement, not growth, not operating, solely asset management. However, the strategy that we have in place, it's roughly about 1% of the replacement dollars needed, and are also maximizing grant opportunities for any other ways of maintaining those assets so that we extend their useful life and not have to follow that the shorter replacement rules. So, yes, we will, and Matt and I have been in long discussions about asset management. That's something very much on our priority list as well, and we will definitely do more in the next year.
Any other questions or comments on the budget? Martin?
Well, second, Mr. Mayor, I guess you were really talking about insurance cost a while ago. It's gonna be 25,000 is the increase?
Yes, we received the quote from the insurer, and it is about 25,000 that has gone up by. So compared to what we had in the budget and what their quote has come in 25,000.
I guess we were told last time this is because we've had no claims, that's correct? Other than, we haven't lost any big ones, they have to investigate you out there, so what? That's why they take 100,000 plus a year. It seems like every time they talk to anybody, they have their hands up to us, write us, I just don't agree with it. Doesn't hold much weight to me, I don't know if the counties, can they get together with municipalities and kind of put a challenge to this, of why we have had such large increases? It's just not sustainable.
Well, the county has experienced the same amount of increases that Malahide has. And there's a number of municipalities that didn't like the increase and they went out to tender. And they found out the tenders were no better than what the existing policy was. It's just probably across North America, maybe in the world, that if their expenses are up, and so they need to cover their expenses. So, like it or not, if there was somewhere else to go, I think everybody was doing it, but it just isn't. Rick?
I'm thinking, Mr. Mayor, it's not just the municipal government. I know, Patrick Creek Conservation Authority, I think our insurance premium went up by 16,000. So, you must have seen the I'm sure. So, how do you stop it? You just, and I talked to different insurance guys, and there's only two big ones in Ontario that can actually give you the quote. So you're kind of stuck in the rock and the hard place.
And it's not just Ontario, it's across North America.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the budget? Because staff is suggesting 2.86% tax increase, which is reasonable. Michelle?
Just one point of clarification, Councilor Witter had suggested adding in an additional $5,000 for additional repairs or equipment at the South Dorchester Community Hall. I don't believe that council has made a firm decision one way or the other, or certainly that wasn't made clear to me in the term of the discussions.
You're suggesting that there's some equipment that's on its last legs, and rather than repair it, to replace it?
We, like the past 5 years, we've had to repair one piece constantly, and that tells me you're rid of it. Now I see the big freeze is gone, it's 10 years old, and stuff unfortunately doesn't last as well as stuff we bought 30 years ago, I get that. Sure have a repair to look at, but maybe the freezer could be repaired, that dishwasher is constant. I mean, I'm in the hall for all events, and they have knives in the kitchen, but I still walk in there, right? And a lot of times it doesn't work. We'll promise get it fixed, and we do the whole again the next time there. So I think it's enough, let's get this thing fixed up. All the crowd, and we gotta keep it up. I would suggest we put in at least 5, I'm guessing the price of it, I don't know if you know anything about that or not.
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair, that, I support adding that in there. There is a current service call on that piece that we have requested that the technician take a look at the whole thing to see if there is any water being like it's on it, and pending that outcome, it would be welcome to have that money set aside to replace it as needed. But like you said, that there have been, again, this is new to me for this one, but from past experience, that there has been repairs on it, I'd like to get a determination on it and have that available to replace.
It's a bit of a unique piece, because I think it does the washing 5 minutes, super hot, throw it in there, bang, done, dry, and you think keep going on and on. The breakfast, that's the real bonus, it's not working well now, so I would suggest, let's put at least 5 into it.
So the 5,000 was the like-for-like replacement quote that was on it as well.
So that, thank you.
Okay, Dominique,
Maybe
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure that we need to add more. I would like to find it in the budget. So I'm in favor of the repairs, but I'm thinking that it has to be in there already somewhere.
Well, I did have a suggestion, should say, this place has $40,000 in production cost, you know that? There's gotta be a way to get that down, I would say somewhere, that's a lot of money, the chicken bird out there is running outside of this place. So, I don't know, use time use here or what, I don't know, regular street here.
Mr. Mayor, so, what Councilor is referring to is the $40,000 that we have budgeted for utilities for this particular hall. And we have seen, expenses of that during last years. However, just last year, we have signed up the agreement with Amos LAS, which, does bulk purchasing of utilities and such other municipal focused items. So we are expecting to see savings in the coming years. This is our first year. We did take a reduction in our utility budget last year based on that agreement. However, for the $5,000 proposal, I would suggest that we look into our equipment lifecycle replacement reserve and use those funds to forward the purchase. So that would not change our revenue in operating dollars. Because it is a fixed asset that we are buying, so it will go from the reserves.
Okay, a good record in that.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, $5,000 is enough to fix it.
I'm just talking, replacing the dishwasher this time, I mean, fixing, a lot of it needs, that drain, I can fix it for a buck, but I'm not a professional, but I can fix it for a buck or two. Here's the, you know, all the stuff, is the cleaning, good cleaning and some repairs.
If we're fixing or replacing.
I'd have the head here, the repairman look at it, and let's get the estimate, but, you know, it doesn't get a ton of use, but we need it when we need it, and we have these big breakfasts and things, it's, it has to be there, so. Someone's gonna get sick someday, and I'm afraid, I don't want it to be our fault.
I just know $5,000.
Well, as Arun said, there is money in reserve for equipment replacement that they can draw on, that won't affect the levies. It's already there, it's just a matter of using it.
And if there is repairs and maintenance, that will go to the operating budget that we have in the plan. Also, that's a different, that kind of expense. So one is an ongoing operating expense, and the replacement is more of a one-time capital purchase. I would caution though that with the current circumstances, any big breakfast happening is.
Max?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question has been answered in regards to reserve such things as that. This building, that building, everything is getting to the point, I think we're 10, 11 years old. And there comes a point, just like the old Ford car, sooner or later, it's gonna wear out, so thank you.
All right, where are we? Just that, we have some resolutions in regard to the budgets, and it's set at 2.86%. Councilor Woodner's suggestion doesn't change the budget at all. So if everybody is pleased with that, we'll carry on with the resolution. Okay, I don't see any objections, so. Mover and seconder, report number FIM 20-23, entitled Year 3 of 2019 to 22 multi-year budget operating and capital received. The municipal council may request to approve the amended 2021 to 2022 operating and capital budget as presented. And the municipal council may request to approve the user fee schedule for 2021 and 2022 as previously presented. Mover and seconder, please. Louis, Moore, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next we have correspondence. Who's dealing with the correspondence? Michelle?
Yes, Mr. Chair, sorry, bear with me, I'm just gonna scroll down through my agenda, sorry. So the first piece of correspondence, the council has already dealt with the request that was from the East Elgin Homelessness Initiative, so we would be looking just for council to receive that particular piece of correspondence. The second item is a report from the Almer CAO with respect to a draft 2021 budget and also 2020 budget comparison that has been prepared for the East Albion Community Complex. The Almer CAO is not looking for any direction at this point. In the new year, the Joint Board of Management, of which all of you are a part of, will be meeting. There'll be some parameters set up, so that there'll be a meeting that will end up being virtual, because there'll be too many of us at this stage. But then there will be a detailed review of the budget. This is just for our purposes as a preliminary look at the numbers, and to ensure that while we're comparing our budgets and looking at it, that it fits within the context of what we've got. So lots more discussion to happen on the specific operations of the complex to come. But the Almer CAO wished to submit that to this particular committee for information purposes, so you just need to receive it at this stage as well. The Long Point Region Conservation Authority and the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority have both submitted their proposed 2021 draft budgets as well, so that we have that information and make the decisions which you've already discussed and talked about this evening as well. Those two pieces of correspondence will also appear on your council agenda next week, because the process is that the council has the ability to provide input into any of the Conservation Authority budgets. The Budget Committee technically doesn't. So we've submitted it here for your benefit when you're looking at the entire municipal budget as a whole. But the actual ability to be able to comment on the budget or provide feedback to any of these organizations as part of their budget deliberations will happen at the council proper. So you'll see the same correspondence next week in the council agenda, and the ability to provide feedback to those organizations will be next week. This is simply so you have access to the numbers ahead of time when you're preparing your own or considering the draft budget we've already discussed. So all of these items at this point are for your information and are really just to receive and file at this stage.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I will make a comment on the complex. I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised. I thought the red ink would be terrible, but it's not as bad as what I initially thought it might be.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that the town of Almer is going to see some different outputs, I guess. What happened early on in the COVID pandemic, recognizing that the ice, we did take the ice out early, and recognizing that rentals weren't happening, and the province made the decision to close all that down. The vast majority of the arena staff was redeployed to Almer Parks and Rec. And so based on the agreement that the amendments that were made to the terms of reference and the decision that was made by both councils 2 years ago, I think it is now, a year and a half ago anyways. So the ability to allow the staff to be redeployed back and forth when they were busy has actually saved Malahide significant operating costs. However, the town of Almer, because they were redeployed and were working in Parks and Rec at that point, actually saw a significant increase in their Parks and Rec budget because they had more staff working for a longer period of time. So Almer took the hit essentially to Malahide's benefit in this particular instance. So, but it allowed for all of the staff to continue to be employed throughout the entire COVID pandemic. And of course, Almer had the ability to have lots of work for them to do in their Parks and Rec, and so it was a benefit to their Parks and Rec program, although financially it was an increased cost. So Malahide did much better financially as a result of that redeployment.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions, Michelle, on any of the correspondence? None. Mover and second, following correspondence be noted and filed. East Elgin Homeless Initiative, request for funding, Town of Aylmer, CAO report 88-20. East Elgin Community Complex draft 2021 budget and 2020 budget comparison. Long Point Regional Conservation Authority 20-21 draft. Catfish Creek Authority 20-21 preliminary draft, and Kettle Creek 2021 draft budget. Serta, Winder, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, since we've covered everything, do we need another budget meeting? Okay. So the question period, I don't see anyone in the audience. Anything before we adjourn? None. Mover and second, the budget committee adjourned its meeting at 8:15. Jensky and Widner, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.